In this video, we're going to be talking about price elasticity of demand and everything you need to know to work it out. What does the answer show, and how could you evaluate it? So let's start with the basic definition. Price elasticity of demand measures how demand changes for a product in relation to a change in price. So it's if I change the price of my product, and that could be going up or down. So if I change it, if the price goes up by 10%, 50%, 100%, what will happen to demand? We know that demand always changes. When the price changes, demand always changes. But will it change by a lot, or will it change by a little bit? Remember that the error that people make is they think if something is inelastic, it means demand doesn't change. That's not true. Demand always changes when you change the price, but it's by how much it changes by. The equation that you definitely needed to know to work out PED, price elasticity of demand, percentage change in quantity demanded over percentage change in price of that product. So let's say you do your equation and you get an answer. What does that answer show? There are questions in past papers where you're asked to work out PED, and then you have to analyze the answer. You have to talk about the significance of the number that is shown there. So remember, PED is always a negative number, always, no exceptions at all. So if you do PED and you get a positive number, then you've done something wrong. So you go back and work it out again. It's always a negative number, always. But it can either be elastic or inelastic. And how do you work that out? Well, it's quite simple. If it is between 0 and -1, so 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, etc., it's inelastic. So if it's not a whole number, if it's 0 point something, it's inelastic. If it's anything else, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, -1.35, -4.78, whatever it is, any other number apart from 0 point something, it is elastic. And that's important to know the difference between that. If something is inelastic, so if it's between 0 and -1, it means that a change in the price of the product will mean a less than equal change in demand. Example of that. If I change the price by 50%, if I increase the price by 50%, demand will fall by 40% or 30% or 20%. That's because if it's inelastic, that means we have changed the price by this number. Demand is going to change, but it's going to change by less. So if it's inelastic, as it says, it will change by less. So price changes by this, demand could change by 40. 40 is less than 50%. 30, still less than 50%. 20, also less than 50%. So for something to be inelastic, it means that when you change the price, demand will change, but by less than what you did to the price. If something's elastic, it's the other way round. A change in price will lead to a greater change in demand. So again, if we increase the price by 50%, we know when the price goes up, demand's always going to fall. That's a fact. Things get more expensive, people buy less of them. That is true. However, how much demand falls by depends on if it's elastic or inelastic. So price has gone up by 50% and demand has fallen by 60 or 70 or even 80%. That makes it elastic because demand has changed by more than the price. Does the number actually matter? Like, for example, if PED was -3 and then I did it for another product, and I found PED was -5. So one's -3, one's -5. Does it actually matter? Well, yeah, it does. The number actually means something. What it means is the bigger the number, the more elastic it is. So something that's -5 is more elastic than something that's -3. That's important because if you're the company that has the -5 number, then you know that your product is really, really, really sensitive to price. If you change the price by a little bit, you're going to see demand change by a lot. Whereas if I'm the -3 company, I know that my product's still elastic, but it's not quite as sensitive as the -5 one. So the answer is important. It's not just about whether it's elastic or not. It's about how elastic it is. So example here, if you've got a price elasticity of demand of -2.4, that's more elastic than one that's -1.5. So you can have two products that are called elastic products, but one might be more elastic than the other one. But what actually affects whether something is elastic or not? And this would certainly be important for any exam about elasticity. You need to know why something is elastic. Well, one is it a luxury or a necessity? So have a think. Which one of those is the elastic one? One of them is elastic and one is inelastic. Luxury products are usually elastic, necessities are inelastic. If it's a necessity, I have to buy it, so if you change the price, I'm still going to buy it anyway, so demand is not going to change by very much, and that is the definition of inelastic products. So for example, tea is inelastic because it is a necessity. I am forced to buy it. If you change the price of tea, pretty much most people will still buy it. Demand might fall by a little bit, but overall, we're a nation of tea drinkers, so people will still buy tea bags anyway. However, the new Google Watch, this is the gold version, which retails at something like $3,000. If you change the price of that to $4,000, demand's going to drop off massively because it's not a necessity, it's a luxury item. Another factor is about substitutes. If a product has a lot of substitutes, it makes it more elastic. Why? Because if I change the price of my ice cream, people are going to stop buying it and just buy a different brand of ice cream because there's a lot of substitutes. So if there's a lot of choice for the consumer, they'll see the price go up for one product and they'll think, well, I'm not going to buy that anymore, and they will simply go and buy it elsewhere. Third factor, what proportion of your income do you spend on it? If a product's really cheap and I'm only spending a couple of pounds on it, if you change the price by 10%, I'm probably not even going to notice. It was £2 and now it's £2.10. Doesn't really make any difference. That will make it inelastic. You don't really notice because I'm not really spending very much on it. For example, every day if you go to Nero or Costa and you buy a coffee for like £2.30, that's a small part of your income. You barely even think about it. So if they change the price from £2.30 to £2.40, you probably don't really notice most of the time. Therefore, it's inelastic. You just keep buying it anyway. However, if it's a really expensive item, like buying a sports car, and it was already £50,000, and then suddenly it goes up to 55 or 60 grand, that is a big amount of extra money that's being put on top. So it's going to make it more elastic. What you could do to argue this point, though, to evaluate this point, is if you're rich enough to afford a £50,000 sports car anyway, then it going up to 55 or 60 grand is you've probably got the money anyway, and that is a fair point to say. However, in general, if the product is expensive and it takes up more of your income, it does make it more elastic. Finally, time is a big issue when it comes to elasticity. Something can start as being inelastic, but over time become more elastic. What do I mean by that? Well, I always give the example of petrol here. If petrol went up in price, at first it would be inelastic. Demand would stay roughly the same. You have to buy petrol. But after 6 months or a year of it being more expensive, it might become more elastic because people suddenly realize, hang on, petrol's not going to be getting any cheaper anytime soon. I've been paying this higher price for a while now, and so I'm going to have to look to switch to an alternative. There's no substitute for petrol, but instead people might just stop buying petrol because they might stop going in their car. They might ride a bike or walk instead. So overall, why is elasticity important? There must be a reason why a business does it. And remember, elasticity is done by a business. Consumers like you or me, we don't care about elasticity. I don't go into a shop and go, that's elastic, that's not elastic. It's something a business does because it's helpful to them. It's all about revenue, cost and demand. It's all about a business trying to work out, what do I do with the price of my product? How will it affect my revenue, the money, my sales that I'm going to have? So if something is elastic, so if it's very sensitive to a change in price, if we reduce the price, demand's going to go up by a lot because it's very sensitive. That means we're going to make more money overall. We might be selling it for less, but we're selling loads more, so revenue will go up. However, if it's elastic and you increase the price, that means demand will fall by a lot, and therefore your revenue will go down. So basically, if you're a business and you work out that you have an elastic product, the best thing for you to do would be to drop the price by a little bit. Why? Because if you drop the price, demand will go up by quite a lot, and then you'll make more money. If you've got an elastic product, the worst thing that you can do is increase the price, because that's going to cause demand to fall by a lot and you're going to lose money. Other way round, if you've got an inelastic product, so demand is not sensitive to a change in price, and you increase the price, so it's inelastic, and I put the price up, demand will not change by very much. I'm putting the price up, people are still buying it, it's a necessity like tea, so you're going to make more money. So if you know your product is inelastic, increase the price. Demand's going to stay about the same, you're going to end up making more money. However, if your product is inelastic and you decrease the price, demand won't really change. So you're basically going to end up selling the same amount of product but for a cheaper price, and you'll end up losing money. So it is important for a business to know whether it's elastic or inelastic. If I've got an elastic product, the best thing for me to do is to drop the price. Demand will go up by a lot. If I've got an inelastic product, the best thing for me to do is to increase the price because I know demand will stay roughly the same. Just quickly, the last thing I want to do is to illustrate this by going through a question. So here we have a question from one of the exam papers. It says here that the Royal Mail announced a 30% price increase. So price has gone up by 30%. If price elasticity of demand is -2, demand will be, well, think back to the equation. PD is quantity demanded over price. So it's telling me that the answer is -2. So something over 30% equals -2. Remember, it's always a minus number. So something divided by 30 is -2. Well, therefore, the answer, it must be 60. 60% divided by 30% equals -2. A fall of 60%. Now, because the figure is -2, that must mean the product is elastic. -2. It's an elastic product, and that makes sense because first class stamps are a luxury item. If you want to send a bit of post, you don't have to send it first class, you can send it second class instead. So there are substitutes for first class stamps. So there we go, that is price elasticity of demand. You have to know how to work it out, and you have to know what causes it to be elastic, and you have to know what that affects a business in terms of its revenue.